Live your life, boy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
Yeah, rear naked choke of Cocker Spaniel, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Bro.
Change the neighborhood up.
Conspiracy Farm. Go. Check it out.
Of course, joined as always with my co-host, Jeffrey Wilson, the brains behind the operation. How are you, Jeff?
Well, let's not get crazy, shall we? Let's not get crazy. But, you know, as always, fun, always awesome to be riding shotgun with you. I've been wanting to speak to this gentleman. I mean, I've spoke to him before, but I've always wanted to speak to him in a more official capacity to record what he's been up to. He's one of those, I like to call these altruistic agents of alchemy, because he's transforming human beings' lives. And there's not a lot of people that can say they're doing that. He's not necessarily turning lead into gold, but he's helping people basically, you know, raise their consciousness and help change the quality of their life. And again, there's not a lot of people can say that they're doing that. And we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that kind of we're all going through and how to try to maintain sanity in an insane world. But even in not an insane world, just everyday, just ways of psychological, spiritual self-care.
Very well said. Very, very well put. So, our next guest graduated from Purdue University around 2008. He also wrestled at University of Purdue. After that stint, then trained with me at my gym and became quite a good, accomplished MMA fighter. And then one day he walked into my office and he said, "Hey, what kind of chance do I have to win a championship in this?" And I said, "As good as any that I've seen." And he said, "Because I've got a chance to go get my master's degree." And I said, "Well, that's not really a difficult choice, getting punched in the face or getting a master's degree. You should probably go get the master's degree," which he did in economics from George Mason University. He's now a motivational speaker, a mindset coach, and an amazing hypnotist. He's done some really cool stuff, and I've observed that and actually experienced it myself once in the past, and I'd love to do that again. So our guest, Nick Spohn, welcome, buddy.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. That was quite the introduction, and Jeff, I really like that altruistic, alchemical, whatever you said. That was really good.
Alchemical agent of altruism.
I love it. I love that. I'm gonna have to start using that. That's
AAA,
good.
baby, AAA, the real AAA.
We've been waiting to do this podcast for a while, so I'm excited to be on here.
Sure.
Awesome. And so I see it as there's two sides to everything. There's good alchemists and there's bad alchemists. There's folks that are throwing out incantations for the negative all over the media, constantly programming people. And then we've got people like you that are unprogramming and reprogramming people, their subconscious, and helping them to be successful in life, get rid of depression, a lot of other things. So, you know, talk a little bit about that and how that process works with the subconscious a little bit. I want to dive right into it.
Yeah. So alchemy was always just a metaphor of turning kind of base emotions into those higher emotions, you know, lead into gold. And it wasn't necessarily metallic. It was the metaphor of transformation, right? Transforming something of a lower nature to a higher nature. And for me, you know, my journey was facing my own insecurities and my own kind of failures and weaknesses along the way. And every time I'd hit one, I'd read, I'd learn from some of the masters, and I'd overcome it. And then I'd go on to the next thing, and I'd hit a wall with my, in mixed martial arts, Pat, and I had a guy like you to take me to the next level. And so every time I hit kind of these emotional insecurities, I would find a new technique, or I'd find a new pattern, a new way through it. And after a few years, you know, that was kind of based on just my real estate business and entrepreneurship. And after a few years, I realized, you know, I've actually gone pretty deep in a lot of this stuff, and people are starting to listen to what I say, and I'm starting to get results, just giving people new insights. And so I kind of put together a framework of how to use our mind and our thoughts to create a life that we want, to create a life that's on purpose, instead of having it dictated to us by the media, by our culture, by our society, by our parents, and by our fears. And so that's kind of what I do, is I show people their patterns and help them decide new and empowering patterns.
Okay, so when we talk about, say, triggers, so there's triggers for everybody to a certain extent if they've had some trauma in their lives. You know, for instance, riding in a vehicle with a combat vet, and when there's traffic issues, he gets boxed in by other vehicles and stuff because the IEDs that he experienced, the explosions, the injuries, you know, his friends being killed and injured, he gets really uptight. And, you know, there's things like for me, when people scream at me, because I got screamed at a lot as a kid, that I just don't tolerate it as an adult. And I've tried to set boundaries and let people know, hey, I'm not the one you want to be yelling at. let's cut that off. So, talk a little bit about triggers and deprogramming, those types of things.
Yeah, so triggers aren't even necessarily bad. It's just a response. The brain is a pattern matching machine. And so what happens anytime there's a heightened emotion or something that gets repeated, those are the two ways the brain gets programmed. It starts to make a meaning of that situation and says, oh, people that yell, when I get yelled at, I'm in a dangerous spot. I need to feel this emotion to compel me to take this action. Or when I'm trapped in a vehicle, this is a dangerous situation. Whether it is or not, the subconscious makes that meaning if we don't consciously decide. But again, you could play a song on the radio that triggers a positive emotion, right? The subconscious doesn't discriminate between that good and bad. Whatever emotion is there, it links up. So it links up anything that happens in a heightened emotional state. And, I guess my work is just how do we figure out what those triggers are and then go change them.
Beautiful. Jeff?
Well, and it's just one of those things that, I'm glad we have you on here, but it's one of those things I heard. It's like, whether it's a PTSD wartime thing, you've been traumatized as a child, we all were downloaded into our operating system from whatever it is, 0 to 7, the operating system that we were pretty much going to work and play out from 7 onward. So talk to us about that, if you will. How the operating system is downloaded from that 0 to 7 into your subconscious, and then for the rest of our life, we're just playing out, good or bad, whatever that operating system was that downloaded. And when it comes to things that are toxic or not necessarily beneficial to us, how rewriting or relearning or retraining, whatever the term is, our unconscious mind to changing certain behaviors.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. So first of all, sometimes it even happens before we're born, right? This is epigenetics. If our parents have a strong emotional event or a strong fear, that gets coded into our DNA, and we come into the world with that. And then you're right, from 0 to 7 is basically hypnosis, that critical factor that decides, do we want to take this on as a belief or not? That's not there. And so we in that state, hypnosis is a heightened state of learning and focus. And so from 0 to 7, we want to learn as fast as we can to be able to make it in this world, right? So everything we hear, everything we experience becomes part of us from that 0 to 7, so we can have our best chance of survival. And it takes a lot to go back and to change that. And those programs often last people's whole lives because they don't learn any different. So as a child, if they see their parents fighting, or they see one of their parents using anger as a strategy to get what they want or protect themselves, guess what? That child, in that moment, it can happen, it happens often multiple times, but it can happen in a moment where they learn anger is a strategy for me to use to, reclaim my power or to draw a line in the sand or to get what I want. And so boom, that's born. And then that lasts. Consciously, they're like, I don't know why I'm getting angry, but the subconscious is like, look, anger is a tool for us. Let's use it, right? That subconscious there's no discretion there. It's just using what's programmed emotionally. And the most important program from that 0 to 7 that we all have is how we get loved and accepted. So for some of us, we have to avoid our parents because we're going to get, abused by them. For some of us, we have to perform, or we have to be funny, or we have to be attractive. We have to be all these things. And so from 0 to 7, we start to learn. And some people, they can throw a fit and they get love, right? And that program then lasts often the rest of their lives. So from 0 to 7, we have this, how can I get loved and accepted? Because that's my source of survival. That program starts to set in. And for most people, it carries with them the rest of their lives until they can really become aware, that self-awareness, right? Know thyself, start to see those patterns. Then you can go back and you can change that. And we can talk about that next. But let me ask you guys if you have any questions, if that made sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask you about the epigenetic side of it too, because not only do we get stuff downloaded as children, like you said, but DNA has, and I don't know the full quantification of the terms or whatever, but DNA remembers. And, it's definitely passed on when you start talking about like generational trauma, et cetera, et cetera. It's definitely real.
Well, yeah, it's not like a crazy concept. Let's simplify it. I mean, a bird can build a nest and they don't have a degree in nest building, right? They don't go take certification programs or whatever. Like, they just know, because the DNA over thousands of years, every time a bird puts a piece somewhere and it's like, oh, this is how I should build it. That makes sense. That they kind of have a little bit of emotional program. Boom, it sticks in the DNA. And then that gets passed down as instinct. And so we all have the exact same thing. Most of ours are pretty similar, our instinctual responses, but they can be very different as well based on where we were raised, our lineage. And so, yeah, it makes a ton of sense that we would have emotional responses that our ancestors had.
Well, and think about, when we talk about, this podcast, the Self-Defense Warrior podcast, right? So humans are the only animal born on the planet with no self-defense instincts born into us, as well as generally the types of beliefs we're going to have religiously. A lot of different things, our opinions and things are molded by what we learn. It was never born into us. And humans literally are void of so many things when they're born compared to, wild animals.
Yeah, and that's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, right? If you look at a crocodile, if they see their parents, they're going to get eaten by them. And so they're on their own from day one. And I think that's why they have such a bad attitude. Us humans, on the other hand, our survival mechanism, our competitive advantage is that we're loved and we're taken care of, so our brain can develop. We can take our time with all these very complex patterns, all this infrastructure for language to be built and body language and movement and complex planning. That takes time and a lot of evolutionary resources to build. And so we can't go be the crocodile and survive on our own in the beginning. And so again, Pat, that comes back to that. The most emotional thing we do as humans is learn to get love. And so from that 0 to 7, we're subconsciously seeking okay, I said this and everybody laughed and they loved me. Let me do that again. Or I spilled the milk and I got yelled at. Let me make sure I don't do that again. And then I'm afraid of messing up. And so and two people can have the same responses and make totally different meanings of that, right? We all make a meaning in our head of a situation. One person can get pushed around as a kid and think, I'm weak. Another kid like you, Pat, can get pushed around as a kid and think, that's never going to fucking happen again. I'm going to whoop somebody's ass, right?
Yes.
But it's the same situation, but we make different meanings of that. And those meanings create our whole life. And so as adults, we can look at our emotional patterns and say, wow, I get really angry in this situation. Or, when somebody stands up to me, I back down and I get anxious and I get fearful. And we can generally, and this is what I do in hypnosis, we trace that back to what's called the initial sensitizing event. And we found where someone made a meaning that then constructed their whole strategy for living going forward. And we change it at that young age. And then and it usually collapses all of those patterns going forward. Sometimes we rehearse, throughout the life, live your life as if that didn't happen when you're young. Live your life as if that was actually a blessing in some way. This thing that you thought was a trauma or a negative event, that you learned from it. How would you apply that in your life? See yourself living your life and then see your future with this new pattern, this new meaning. And because the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's real or imagined, we can use our imagination to imagine ourselves behaving and being in a different way and being a different type of person. And if we practice that enough, it just becomes who we are. Does that make sense?
Fake it till you make it.
Sort of, but
yeah.
Faking it implies that you're not feeling congruent with that. But if we do it in hypnosis, where you can actually step into that imagination, and this is a good segue. So, beta brainwaves is when you're living your life and what's on the outside seems real. Alpha is when our subconscious and our conscious mind are communicating, and your internal pictures, you can start to make them into reality, and that's where we get creativity. But theta brainwaves, that's where that 0 to 7, right? That's when you're getting hypnotized as a kid. That 0 to 7, you're in theta. And it's the same when we do hypnosis. And right as we're falling asleep and right as we're waking up, we're going into theta. And theta is where what's on the inside, the pictures you're making, your imagination, is more real than what's on the outside. And so when you do that, that's when you start to experience it as you. And you feel, oh my gosh, like I am this person. I feel that confidence. I see myself speaking. And I know, Pat, we talked about you visualizing fighting, right, in the cage. And in your imagination, that was more real than wherever you were sitting on the couch or laying in bed or whatever you were doing. And because you did that so much, you just became that type of person. Does that make sense?
Sure. Visualization is very powerful.
Yeah. So, and hypnosis is really just kind of guided visualization in a lot of ways. And that changes the meanings that we've made on important life events. It changes how we see ourselves, which is the self-image, which is kind of the foundation for how we perform in the world.
So that theta from 0 to 7 also forms that center of the universe feeling, where you see a lot of people that think they're the center of the universe, and I catch myself all the time being the center of the universe, where we look at people who in positions of power, say for instance, who are demonstrating they're the center of the universe, or so they think, right? And how they are capable of selfishness, greed, all these different things, where, that all of that came from because when I cried when I was a little kid, I got picked up. When I was hungry, I got fed. When my diaper was dirty, it got changed. Cry, response, all of that. And then we build that pattern going forward into life. And it's amazing when I reflect on my life. I've been wearing a diaper for years, bro.
I'm guessing you mean that you have the same patterns as when you were a child, right?
I've grown a lot in terms of observing, and it's that growth out of a lot of stuff that's painful, right?
Yeah.
And getting through all of that stuff can be exceedingly painful, and we see a lot of people that are not necessarily growing out of things. They're not changing. They're not questioning their beliefs or anything like that, and they're staying the same, mainly out of fear, probably.
Yeah. And so for starters, you have to have a desire to change. You have to have a desire to improve and to get better and to really look at your beliefs and say, is this true? How do I know this is true? Do I want this to be true? Many times those people who have these limiting patterns or these fear patterns, they think they're correct. And so they're not even questioning, they're not even questioning, am I right or not? They think every time they get angry, they're just right. And when I get angry, I'm like, what is this about me that's getting angry? Like what's the program that I'm running here? And I look at myself, and that's where you can make change. And so that's the number one thing that someone has, for me to even work with them, they have to say, I'm responsible for my life situation, and I'm willing to question my beliefs. I'm willing to question my programs. I'm willing to really look at why I respond this way instead of blaming my partner, blaming the government, blaming, anything you think of, the president. Saying, what is it in me that's feeling like a victim? What is it in me and my background and my meanings that's making me feel this way? And that's really the start of the conversation.
When I think one of those terms, and I'm sure you've probably heard of Eckhart Tolle, he talks, and it's very, over the years of reading his books and understanding his work, where he talks about your life versus your life situation. And not to get too deep into it, but this is just kind of what he says. Our life is where infinite conscious awareness. Our life situation is our marital status, our job, whatever external thing that we tend to make validate who we truly are, when ultimately that's just an illusory status, when in fact, our life is, like I said, it's way bigger than our life situation. And what do you find with a lot? I mean, because you really, and that's what's so cool. I've been wanting to talk to you about this, and I really want to partake in one of your trips to Sedona, because that's one of my favorite places on the planet. When you start getting these people out there, are they out there trying to better their already coolness? Are they recognizing that they have holes in their game and they want to stop doing XYZ situation to reach this kind of next level of enlightenment? What are you finding that most people, when they're going out to these retreats, not specifically what are their issues, but I'm assuming they're all trying to get out of their own way to some degree.
Yeah, of course. And it's various. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think it's a combination of like, okay, I'm really cool in this area and I'm a total loser in this area. And I think that's kind of the human experience. So when I do events, I think one of the coolest things that happens at them is people share their experiences, and they go, someone might get really vulnerable and say, when I was 3, I had this really bad thing happen to me, and I never feel like I'm good enough because of it. And I look around the room and I go, and they're the only person that never feels like they're good enough, right? And everyone kind of laughs because that's the human experience. And so they see this person who had that experience, although I didn't have the same experience, I do experience the same emotions. And this person who's super confident, I see myself in them in certain situations. And this person who's really anxious, and so they start to see all of their patterns in these other people. And the group kind of like gets super connected because of that. But yeah, they want to learn how to use some of these strategies and language patterns to influence others. And guess what? The keys to influencing other people is the same as influencing ourselves. and changing our own programming. And so we do a lot of work, like I talked about, going back into the meanings that they made early on in life and the values and rules that their subconscious program is using to basically construct their world and their perceptual filters. So everyone, as we've seen in COVID, everyone has different perceptual filters based on their life experiences. So, the three of us generally have similar perceptual filters about the whole COVID thing. But we go talk to somebody else and they have a totally different 180-degree different experience of COVID than we did, right? And I'm not even going to share our views. I'm sure.
No, but the problem is it's just difficult to hear them through their mask.
Yes. But we can say, like, okay, based on their upbringing, the way that they relate to authority, the media they're consuming, they're constructing something based on their beliefs. And then once they believe that, they just go out into the world. They'll find the scientific studies. They'll find the experts. They'll find friends that all confirm their views. And so COVID just made that more obvious, but we all do that all the time. We're always out there confirming our biases. We're looking at the world saying, it must be this way because this is what I believe. And I'm going to find the scientific data to show it.
Right.
And I've kind of been experimenting with some different diets, and I'm on the carnivore diet right now, and I've kind of done vegetarian or vegan as well. And I'm watching videos on this, and I'm seeing, I'll watch a carnivore video, and in the comments, oh my God, I just stopped eating vegetables. I feel incredible. 2 years, no vegetables. I feel so good. This meat diet is amazing. And I'll go read the vegan videos, the comments. I stopped eating meat 2 years ago. I've never felt better in my life, right? All those meat eaters are total idiots. And I'm like, how can we have such total opposite views and everybody's having a different experience of something as basic as what we eat, because we're filtering the world through our beliefs. Yes. And it's so important. Once you understand that, you can say, oh, he's not really angry. He's just filtering the world and giving this experience meaning. And when you do that, you can start to relate to people because they're responding with a program, with the subconscious program.
That's my kids. My two oldest daughters have already done the vegan thing. They've done the pescatarian thing, and for a year at a time, mind you. These are young ladies that are still in college, and they are really good at questioning their beliefs. And that's something that I got to a certain point where I started questioning a lot of things just because of things that had happened in my life, including, certain treatments that are, being mandated and things like that. But that was over 20 years ago when I started researching that. And I was raised by a lady. My mother was a nursing director at a hospital and the head of the nursing school at the time. So my whole viewpoint was absolutely everything. You've got to get the whole schedule, whatever.
Yep.
Protect ourselves, until I started really digging in with an open mind and researching and going, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. And I don't think the risks outweigh the benefits, in a lot of different ways. So that's just one of the many areas that I had to question my beliefs. And I still question my beliefs every day. And I'm sure you guys do too.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, that's the key to change. And you have to remember also that everybody is doing the best they can with what they've got. And it may not seem like it, but based on their intellectual processes, their perceptual filters, their life history, everyone's just trying to get by, and for some people that means going to get the shots because they don't know better. They don't have the open mind, but I think genuinely, people are trying to do the best they can. And it's people like us who have to meet them with compassion and try to open their minds, right? Not ram our beliefs down their throats, but just ask questions and be curious. And I think this ties into my 3 steps of hypnotic influence, which is, first of all, to get into rapport with somebody. And if you're in rapport with somebody, you're not butting heads with them, right? You're finding that commonality. You're getting energetically, you're syncing up with them. And then from there, you can start to ask questions and you can start to kind of shift their mindset. But without rapport, it doesn't work. And I know I've seen this over the last couple of years where I get so dogmatic about what I believe and what I think is right, that I'll bring that energy into a conversation and I'll just create like this conflict. Whereas when I can meet someone who has opposite views and really have the intention of building rapport with them first, I get way farther than bringing a conflicting energy.
A real genuine exchange of ideas, which just seems like it's so difficult to have anymore because we're so all about, like you said, like I'm right. Like my information is the information, whether it's COVID or whatever. And something Tole said, which I thought was really powerful. And I want to get your thoughts on this. This need, obviously there's a huge ego part of it, but this need to be right about whatever it is, whether it's politics, religion, or whatever. He said ultimately is about a fear of death. Because the need to be right is about the need to control external circumstances. And what's the biggest external circumstances that none of us can control? And that's the fact that we're all going to die. So, I mean, I don't know if there's a definite link to that, but I found that so very interesting because it seems to make sense that a lot of people who with this stringent, very not very flexible view on the world, whatever it is, cosmology or anything else, it seems very interesting to me that there is that component of you need to be right because you need to control these external circumstances, whether it's, control freak wives or just whatever it is. This need to control external stuff, whether it's the truth, information, whatever, your whatever. It has to do with the fear of death. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the need to control is always out of fear, right? I think if someone was truly, let's say, enlightened and just, Jesus said, give no thought for tomorrow. I think if you were truly enlightened, and trust me, I'm a long ways from that, you would be in the moment, just living life as it comes to you, and there would be no concern, and you would just know that things would work out, and they would work out. And when you die, it was the perfect time for you to die, and it was all meant to be, right? That's the work we're doing, is to get to that point. But I think what it comes down to is subconsciously, we all have a need to be right, because if we're right, then we're going to be accepted by our tribe. We're going to be of value. And if we're not accepted by our tribe, like Pat said earlier, we're not going to be taken care of. We're not going to be given those few years. We're going to be kicked out of our tribe, and our chances of survival are going to be way down. And so it comes back to the fear of death. And I think that's the program that runs most people's life. I have to be right because then I have value for my tribe. If I'm wrong, I'm going to get kicked out of my tribe. And if I get kicked out of my tribe, I'm going to die. And I think that's why public speaking is the number one fear, because if you go in front of people and you mess up, right, that fear, we don't consciously think about it, but the fear is if I screw this up in front of everybody, I'm never going to be able to mate again. No one's going to want to do business with me. They're going to kick me out of the tribe, and I'm going to die, right? People go like that's where the subconscious goes. And so we miss that, though. We just get the feeling of fear. Like, hey, maybe we should just stay in line and play it safe because the reward's not worth the risk in the subconscious unless you train that. But yeah, I think he's right on that.
Well, and it's another one of those things, and not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but this is what we're here for. That fear is rooted in the notion of how kind of the West treats death. Like, granted, we all have different religious beliefs, like, no, there's an eternal life afterwards, but all we really know, we've never died and come back and like, no, here's what it is. All we know is this biological life that we experience these five senses. So at some point, it's like there's this like, death is the end. And as opposed to looking at like, no, dude, it's just a transference of energy. Yeah, we're going to miss this loved one we have, but let's not be selfish about it. This life is just a parenthesis of our larger existence. So I think I guess that's my question. Our Western treatment of death adds to the fear as opposed to seeing it as something larger, an extension of our larger life. We see it as like the end, if you will.
Yeah, and you only live once, right?
I.e. the Catholic religion, you're condemned to hell.
Yeah,
yes.
I think that's one of the most limiting beliefs there is that you only live once. I think most of the rest of the world has accepted that they live multiple lives. If you look at India, they're actually often criticized because they don't have a sense of urgency about what they're doing, because they're like, we'll do it in the next life.
As a grasshopper.
Yeah, Americans are like, I have one life. I gotta go. And they have this urgency. And
YOLO.
I think a restlessness. And then one of my favorite quotes is from, in the movie Hook, Captain Hook. And he's about to die and he says, death is just life's next great adventure. Or something like that. Something about, death is the final great adventure. And I was like, that's an interesting way to frame it.
Especially coming from a pirate, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, were you hanging out with freaking Prince Siddhartha or something, dude? How do you know that?
yeah, it's an interesting thought, but I mean, I think I look at life as an opportunity to grow. I don't think we can do that in one lifetime. I think if I need to come back in another lifetime to grow more, great. If I am graduated from this world and I go on to something better, great. And so the fear of death, I don't spend any time thinking about it, you know?
It's interesting. Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
So I had read a book years ago by Dr. Evan Alexander, who is one of the most well-known neurosurgeons in the world, educated at Oxford and Harvard, genius IQ. And he believed that the brain was the beginning and end of consciousness. So when you died, that was it. Everything went dark and you were done. And then he got a blood meningitis, which I had a form of meningitis when I was a kid, experienced it. But he went into a coma and was brain dead for, I believe, 10 days. And spent many trips back and forth to what he said was heaven, and had a tour guide and said it was amazing and, a lot of really cool things about it. But the thing that he said was, and I brought this up to another friend, Jeff, a common friend of ours, that he said, I've never told anybody this besides my wife. I died once, and I want to tell you about it. And it was because I was in a really deep conversation about a rock star that I spent 4 hours talking to after a show in his green room about meditation, DMT, about being able to leave his body, some really cool stuff. So anyway, this friend of ours said I was raking leaves in the yard. I'm taking care of my grandma's house for a couple of days and raking her leaves, and must have been spores or some sort of mold or whatever that got him. And he started feeling crummy, and he went inside, he laid down, and he said he got worse and worse. And by the time he decided that he was dying and needed to call 911, he was literally paralyzed. And then he goes, I died. And I took a trip and I had a tour guide, just like Dr. Evan Alexander said. And he said, if everybody understood what it was like after this life, there would be no greed, there would be no war, there would just be no hatred, there'd be nothing but love. And I asked him, because Dr. Evan Alexander said when he tries to explain it to humans, it's impossible, because he would ask a question of his tour guide, an angel, telepathically, a question, and then instantly the answer would come back. And he said the answers were as vast as cities, but he understood them perfectly. And so I posed that to our friend, and I said, is that what you experienced? He said, exactly. That's exactly what it was. So it was really a confirmation for me to have these matching experiences that are, exactly alike. Really, really cool.
Well, yes. Before you respond to that, Nick, let me ask you, how much is, when people do, I don't know if you read Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, these near-death experiences, the things people see, it's different depending on your culture. How much of these things people often see after quote-unquote death are part of the downloading, if you will, of, you know what I mean, of your cultural norms, your spiritual norms? This person sees Jesus, this person sees Buddha. You know what I mean? Like, how much is it actually happening, or how much is it actually a projection of their kind of downloading of the operating system?
Yeah. So, I mean, our brain is metaphorical. So if you die and you see something, and it's someone sees a white light and someone else sees a red light, or someone sees a lion and someone else sees a butterfly, they're all metaphors for certain things, and all of our nervous systems or brains or our souls process that information differently. And I think that's why we've had so many avatars come back to this world, because people resonate with different messages differently, and they all kind of say the same thing. But Jesus and Buddha, and some people they resonate differently based on their system. So I think the brain is creating metaphors to get you the information that you need. Does that make sense?
Interesting? Yeah. Well, but what's interesting about that is Dr. Evan Alexander pointed out, because he had been educated out of the belief in God, that the brain again was the beginning and ending of all consciousness. He was completely brain dead during his coma. There was zero brain activity. So therefore, he had no explanation medically to explain it to himself. And he goes through at the end of the book and goes through all the different medical conditions and different explanations that he would many times give people who said they had an afterlife experience or after-death experience, whatever you would call it. And he said, all of these different reasons, because I was brain dead, had no activity, I have no explanation for it.
So I think the divine gives opportunities like that to people to get them to snap out of their current belief system, right? And you couldn't tell this guy about that because he wouldn't believe it, right? He had to experience it for himself for him to go have a whole different experience of the world, of his soul, of, consciousness. And I think those altered states of consciousness are what people for millennia have been seeking, right? And, sometimes it's through drugs, sometimes it's through meditations or extreme sports or whatever, where you talk about, having an increased ability to perceive, to accept information. And in our normal waking human state, we just have a very limited ability to do that. And, I've had some experiences with, mushrooms, psychedelics, where I've had those experiences, and I'm now on the mission of trying to figure out how to do that without those. And so, I think Kundalini energy, which sits at the base of the spine, if you can, the right way through meditation and exercises, move that through your system and up to your brain, that's life force energy. And when that energy hits your brain, you make new neural connections and you expand your ability to perceive things. Some of those may be extrasensory. Some of those may just be truths that are hidden in your subconscious that come to light. As you move energy up from those lower centers up to those higher centers, you become, your brain gets filled with that energy, and it's like an upgrade to perceive more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You'll find this really interesting, Nick. So I won't mention the name of the person. He's a guitarist for what a lot of people consider the biggest rock band in the world, and he's also a black belt in martial arts. And had that long conversation with him after the concert, and we got into some really in-depth conversation. And he said that he was struck by a bike when he was a teenager, or struck by a truck when he was riding his bike as a teenager, and he died. He left his body and he walked around his town, and he said, I was looking for something, I just couldn't figure out what it was. And then he walked back to his body and laid down, and he woke up and he had blood all over him, and he got on his bike and he rode home and never told anybody about it. So I'm listening to him, and he says, do you do ayahuasca? Have you eaten ayahuasca? I said, no, I've not. But I do a lot of meditation and warrior breath, and I've experienced some pretty amazing things that I've seen. And he said, yeah, because you are releasing DMT. Your body contains DMT, and you're capable of releasing your own DMT and going to different parallels. He goes, have you been able to leave your body yet during your meditations? I said, no. And he goes, I guess I was given that gift that I can, and I recognized very early on that I was a spirit that had a body. And so I'm able to actually leave my body and observe myself when I do deep meditations and breath work. And I'm like, yeah, that's some pretty powerful stuff when you can get to that point. I've seen some crazy stuff. I've experienced my dad's, literally his soul blowing through my body. It was like a flash of light that went through me, because all I saw was, in my vision, I was instantly a child, back to being a child. And all I saw was his arm, and I touched his arm. And the minute I touched his arm, he blew through me. And it was almost like an experience of forgiveness. It was really, really cool. Very powerful.
Yeah. And I think that one of the keys there is you're not your body, right? You're not your thoughts, and you're not your emotions. You're this awareness, this pure consciousness that's experiencing all these things. And this is why sometimes I just laugh at all this, like, this gender stuff and this race stuff and this, like, I'm just like, why are we getting so caught up in what's like this visual thing? We forget that we're divine consciousness in this meat suit. Like, I don't care if you drive a truck or a Maserati or a beat up Camry. Like, for me, that's not that important. And I think the tribal nature in people, like the lower caveman self, we like people like ourselves, right? Like that's how the subconscious, the lizard part of our brain has evolved, is that people that look like us, that talk like us, that think like us, they're safe, right? And if somebody's different, they're in a different tribe, and we're going to fight for resources. And so this is why most people have that default if they see someone with a different skin color and there's like this judgment. But I think once you start to realize we're this divine consciousness inhabiting a human body, you don't really care what their skin color is or, what their gender is. It's like, it's secondary.
Well, and it's one of those things that I've always thought, 'cause again, going back to what I was saying, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but our frame of reference for that spirit world, we don't really connect to that near as much as we are living this biological world, the five senses. And going back to something you guys just mentioned, I think it was William Blake in the movie The Doors, when the doors of perception are cleansed, things will appear as they truly are, infinite. And a lot of people who do, certain hallucinogens, certain psychedelics, they have this feeling of everything is kind of one. What are your thoughts on, even going back to, I remember talking about like Ram Dass back in the day. He was like a super heavy into psilocybin and acid, and he would go to his guru, and the guru's like, dude, I'm like this without any of that shit. And so, like you said, you want to be able to reach those planes without anything artificial. But to certain people who are really kind of the journeymen in this world, I've seen a big proliferation, if you will, of people doing ayahuasca, psilocybin actually being used for depression therapy and PTSD. What are your thoughts on these kind of applications of these very ancient medicines, and how ideally we want to get there, like Pat was talking about, and you've talked about, want to do it without these external means, that it's within us to get there?
The poison is in the dose, right? And these are very powerful medicines, and they can give you some absolutely incredible experiences that will totally shift your perception of the world, and bring you thoughts of love, thoughts of harmony. Will show you your life from a different perception. They're really powerful, and I see a lot of people, probably more than not, that they fall into that trap of, well, the medicine's good, I got to keep doing the medicine, right? The medicine is meant to give you a little shift, a little perceptual shift. And a lot of people I know, they keep going back into it, and they abuse it, and it just becomes like a drug for them, because they're trying to fix their problems instead of going out and facing them in the real world. They try to go in with these drugs and resolve them. And another thing, Jeffrey, is when I think as humans and really as divine creators, we get what we focus on. And so if you go back to heal trauma, you're going to go find some trauma to heal. Well, if you keep going back to heal trauma, you're going to find generation after generation of that shit. You know what I mean? Like, and I know people who've done 20 ayahuasca ceremonies, and they're like, well, I'm doing healing work. I'm like, no, now your subconscious is just finding something to confirm what you're looking for. Like, go live your life. Go face those things in the real world. These drugs don't do the work for you. They can give you a perceptual shift, but you still got to go into the world and do the work.
Yeah.
And so I think on a very limited basis, I would never push someone into them. Generally, it's someone who's like, no, I'm definitely called. This is what I need to do now. If you're questioning it, I would say wait. But again, I think I believe that I'm going to get to a point where I can have those experiences without them. And I've had some really cool experiences already. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. So, again, the poison is in the dose.
Do we notice, or do we find that society in general gears us to becoming, doubling down on the biological self, the 5D or the 3D self? I mean, we're through even our interactions as humans beings. Don't call me, text me. Like, we're having less and less human interaction. We're moving farther and further away from our essence. Is society geared to keep us moving away from, for lack of a better term, the light and who we really are?
I think this is probably a conversation for your Conspiracy Farm podcast, but yeah. I mean, I think generally, that's what's happening, right? We got rubber shoes that insulate us from the energy of the earth. We got houses that insulate us from the weather. We got grocery stores that keep us away from our food and food manufacturing and additives that totally, the stuff we're eating, really, we can't hardly even call food. And we spend very little time in sunlight. And yeah, I think that time in nature is part of the path to, I think it's harmony. I think you get the energy of harmony when you spend time in nature, when you're connected to your food, when you're connected to the elements. And I think it's important for people to have more of that experience, for sure.
Yeah, imagine for people that live in a place like New York City or Los Angeles, and just the constant stimulation and people and noise and just craziness. It's talk about a disconnect.
Yeah, and if you live in the country, or even a place like we live, and you go to some of those cities, like, you feel the energy, the heaviness of it, and the anxiety of it. And for me, I'm like, where I live now is too much. I want to get out into the country and just be in nature and be in that peace. And I think your body and your emotions will show you the way if you listen to them.
When it kind of goes back to what I was saying about, like, kind of the engineering of society, like, we're all 90 whatever % of us, we're all 9 to 5ing. We're all like driving to work, working 8 hours, driving home, spending maybe a couple hours decompressing, and then going to sleep and waking up and doing it all over again. And this becomes our lives. And then even when we go on vacation, like, I don't know about you guys, but I need at least a good 3, 4, 5, maybe in a week to realize I'm on vacation. Cause then it's all like, God damn it. I gotta go back in 3 or 4 days. I need some time to really realize I'm on vacation, enjoy that disconnect and reset. Like we talked about this in our last conversation with, Kevin Flack from, Downrange. I mean, it was just, whether it's called rooting or walking in nature, just being in nature is just proven scientifically to have such a great ability to help reset and limit cortisol. It's, all that other physiological stuff that keeps us stressed out. But again, our lives are just not geared toward being able to take that time. But again, you speak to this, like, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of meditation, something is better than nothing.
Yeah, I think, there's so many like I've read, I don't know, a couple thousand books now. I've been to 60 seminars or something on mindset and energy and whatever, meditation. And there's so many different practices. And I think it's important to find a few that ground you, that center you, that get you emotionally ready for the day, and to do those. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. One of my favorite things to do is to sit and stare at a candle. I think I've talked to you about this, Pat. Because as you stare at a candle, you get that single point of focus, and the energy in my system, when I do that, it starts to bubble up and it starts to dissipate. So stress or tension, I can feel it coming up and I feel it dissipate. So one of the keys to hypnosis is, visual fixation. Fixing your vision on a certain point allows you to go into trance. And so the candle serves as that. And for me, that's just a short way to burn that negative energy in my system off. And then I'm usually go for a walk a couple times a day where I'm outside in the sun and walking through the park and just kind of reconnecting and clearing my head before getting back to work.
I'm afraid of becoming catatonic if I stare at a candle for too long.
I don't know. You might like it. It's for 10 minutes. For me, I do 20 to 30 minutes. But it's a total reset. So, I think that our brain and our body is an antenna. This is kind of one of the keys of what I teach, is an antenna for vibrations. And so whatever we're tuned into, whether that's fear, anxiety, or gratitude, we will see the world through that filter. And so if your antenna is vibrating with gratitude, you'll go out into the world and you'll find things to be grateful for. You'll see beauty in things. If you're anxious, everything that happens to you is something to be anxious about. And so as we think thoughts and we give meaning to those thoughts, we see something on the news and we give meaning to it and we feel a little bit of fear. That fear energy gets released through our hormones, our endocrine system and our hormones. And so then that kind of stores in our body. And so now the vibration of our antenna gets put off. And most people don't know that, again, you're not your emotions. You're just tuned into a certain frequency. And for me, meditation and mindfulness and being in nature, what that does is it clears the energy in the antenna. So you can have a clear signal again. And so most people, they have these fear-based thoughts. They're constantly pumping the news into their system. They're constantly worrying. And so they never get back to like having a clean antenna for vibrations of emotions that they want, right? And the food doesn't help. And kind of our whole life is set to throw the vibrations of our antenna off. And what I want to do is I want to show people how to think and how to live to get to get those vibrations tuned into what they want to experience in this life.
That being said, all the years of travel, as an athlete, as a coach, as a broadcaster, over 1 million miles on United Airlines, all that sort of stuff. And we're also, I guess, understanding the world and how big crowds, a lot of people together in one place can make something that maybe isn't as dangerous as it really would be to us three. If we were together, we'd go, okay, this is what we need to do. Let's move here. Let's take care of the situation. But around large crowds, it can go south really quick, right? So was always my thinking tactically. And I would always think, I'm in the airport and I'm always visualizing. If something goes wrong, this is where I'm going. If I'm in a restaurant, I know where the exit is. I know where the kitchen is in case I need to get the tools. That's just the way my brain has always been wired, at least for the last, 3 or 4 decades. And so given the vibration weighed in with the understanding of being around, being around certain atmospheres, certain crowds, arenas full of people, somebody yells fire, people get trampled, that sort of shit.
Yeah. So Pat, I think based on your life experiences and geez, even your podcast and the people you interview and the people you spend time with, I know you work with the SEALs and you do defense training. I mean, that's the filter that you view the world from. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I know that's based on your life experiences. That's how you view the world. I'll go into a restaurant. I don't even think about that.
Well, it's like David Goggins. David Goggins in his book, Living with a Seal that he was in, written by, what's his name? I'm forgetting.
Jesse Itzler?
Yeah, Itzler. So he said he noticed Goggins always staring out windows and looking and he goes, "What are you doing, dude? Why are you looking out the window?" And he goes, "Everything's a threat. Every car is a threat. Every person's a threat. Everything's a threat. I just like to be safe and look out the windows and make sure nothing's going to go wrong." Jesse Itzler goes, "Dude, I didn't bring you here to be my bodyguard." He goes, "I don't give a shit about you. I don't give a fuck what happens to you. I'm doing it to take care of your wife and kids."
Yeah. But again, so I think you can use that because you've got this ability to now scan, to come up with exit plans, to strategize. You can use that, but I think the key is, do you let it run you emotionally?
Yeah.
Can you be in a space in a restaurant and be like, all right, here's the exit. Here's what I'm going to do if this goes wrong, if they come from this way, whatever. But I'm good. I'm at peace because I'm at peace in a restaurant, either way. But can you assess the situation and can you allow that strategy to then bring you more peace? Or are you going to live on edge based on the meaning that you've given it?
Yeah, I was going to say there's got to be have to be a healthy, I mean, as hard edge as those guys are, just anybody who's in that mindset of just like, I never keep my back to the door or anything like that. It's like you got to strike a balance because it's like, it's almost buying fire or car insurance and then obsessing about fires. Like I'm got to make sure this isn't going to catch up. It's just one of those things it's there. Like Pat, like you have the ability of somebody, it's kind of muscle memory. If something goes wrong and you're not in that mindset, you could easily flip that switch and fucking cancel somebody. That's just who you are and where you come from. But I think even, having those tools and being able to find that balance, because I would think that would be emotionally fucking debilitating and like cortisol levels through the roof. Not that you're obsessing on it, but if every moment you're just like window, threat, like that's not how I want to roll, bro.
Right. And I think it comes to some programming from having been in so many hairy situations on the street.
Without a doubt.
As a security guy and stuff like that. I mean, I've had some pretty crazy things happen where, I was one of two people trying to defend ourselves against a crowd of about 150 people. And then the cops showed up and we were back to back with them in the middle of a one-way, Harrison Street in Davenport, in the middle of a snowstorm with German shepherds diving into the crowd and stuff. So, I know how out of control people can get when they're in groups. And so I always kind of keep my eye on things. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think we have to look at our behaviors and say, is this serving me?
Right.
And so I think in a lot of ways it does serve you. And I think in some ways you probably know you have an opportunity to come up with a strategy and then relax because you've got it.
Right. Good points.
Definitely good tools to have. It's like anything else. I think it's just like finding a balance. Me and a good friend of mine, shout out to my man Sean Wesley, we went to some wrestling here in St. Louis, and I had gotten some free tickets, and we walk in, and I turn around, and he's not there. I'm like, where's Sean at? And he's over there talking to a cop. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? But Sean is a security guard, head of security down at the Ballpark Village. He's like, I saw a dude basically printing on an ankle holster, and I'm like, who sees that? But this guy, out of the sea of people, sees somebody with a gun on his freaking ankle, and the guy gets snatched up and arrested. But it's just like, it obviously is serving him to some degree. And Sean is a super kickback guy, so it's not one of those things that completely overrides his modus operandi. But I'm just like, he was geared that way. He was wired to look for stuff. He saw something, stopped whatever potential threat it was. But I mean, again, it's got to be a balance because I can't imagine, the stress level of constantly seeing threats everywhere.
It just proves that we are all living in a different world, right? We all pick up totally different things and different experiences in the same setting.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things to realize is our lives, what we see, how we perceive the world is based on those few programs we got when we were a child. How do we love? What's important? How do we stay safe? And those emotional events then shape everything that we see. And so we can intentionally program the subconscious mind to see the world in different ways, to behave in different ways. I
remember hearing, I think it was a lawyer or a cop, and they were talking about, what is it called? Like first-hand witnesses to an event, like in court. The people who I was there. I saw it. And sometimes that's the most unreliable testimony because you got 10 people who saw the same thing, but just saw it all very differently.
Correct. Yeah. It's wild. And I think where we go wrong is where we think that we're right. Again, it comes back to that. No, I know I'm right. Well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'll question this. Maybe let's see what's another perspective. And you can have two people with totally different views and they can both be right? Because that's their truth and that's their experience.
Yeah.
Well, and
I remember that's who I was.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
I'm just saying that's who I've been, my in the bar. Look, I'm telling you, religion. I mean, I was that guy for a long time, dude. And now, I mean, it's just getting older and it's just like, I know what I believe to be my truth. Hey, get it how you live it, whatever I think I posted a meme. I'm at the stage of my life where if you say 5 + 5 is 13, fuck yeah, dude, you won. You know what I mean? It's like that old war game statement. The best way to win is not to play. Like I don't, cool, man. I have zero desire to need to be right. I'm always trying to learn or whatever, but it's always, I'm guilty like anybody else of like, you freaking moron. How can you not see X, Y, Z? I mean, I haven't done that in a long time, but I could totally relate to that person. You see it all the time with people, Facebook arguments back and forth. You libtard, you race, whatever it is.
Right. Well, some games were forced to play, right? Like when all of this, the lockdowns happened and all the mandatory this, mandatory that, and whatever. But, so we were forced to play and had everyone projected what they were thinking by not being programmed by what they were told, by going into themselves and their intuition and acting accordingly. Of course, people who are elderly or have comorbidities, things like that, stay away, protect yourself, things like that. We wouldn't have gotten to this point, right? We wouldn't have gotten to this point in the situation with the economy and a lot of other things that are going on. So that's what I'm saying is, enough people project their thoughts onto a situation and it becomes reality.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But even within that, the people that I was trying to learn from or that I was learning from or some of my mentors, they were like, this is going to be a great opportunity to make a ton of money. I don't know how yet. We're going to find a way, right? The real estate market, anytime there's change or there's something dramatic or people go into panic mode. And so because they've tuned their system, they've programmed their subconscious mind, they've decided what outcome they want. Their subconscious mind goes in the world and looks for opportunities. And guess what? They find it because that's how the subconscious mind works. And so when you can give it clear outcomes in any situation, it will start finding ways to confirm that. So if you believe, we have an economic crisis or depression, or if you believe that's the greatest opportunity to make wealth in your lifetime, you're going to start to find ways to do it. If you believe that everything's going to be taken from you, guess what? You're going to find ways to do that too.
Right. So when it comes to your hypnosis, I would like to do a follow-up episode. I don't know if you're willing to do this or not, where we could have listeners listen in and go through a hypnosis session.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, I would be willing to go through it. And Jeff, I'm sure he would, willing to go through it and just have you run the episode and do a hypnosis session. Okay. And people could jump in and go through that.
Yeah. So a lot of times what I like to do is just we do some playing, right? We can see if we can tap into our mind to create physical experiences and then really develop that line of communication with the subconscious, I think is one of the most important things. And so we can ask our subconscious questions and start to get answers. And oftentimes they're answers that we don't expect. And that's generally how we know it's the subconscious answering. So we kind of develop that line of communication. We can trace limiting beliefs or emotional patterns kind of back to their root. We can absolutely do that on a session.
Cool. Very cool.
Have us up here clucking like a chicken.
And that's the thing that we talked about that before on our way, on a road trip that we were on, where I had in my early 20s witnessed at a comedy show, a guy hypnotized 25 people on stage and some of the people in the crowd that went along with it. And he brought them on stage. And you've got a hell's angel giving birth to a baby. You've got all kinds of chaos going on stage. But that's when I recognized the light bulb went on and I went, people are so easily convinced and duped that the hypnosis that they're vulnerable to through media and a lot of other things, how easily this can all happen, right?
Yeah. So I was going to say, I don't really do that kind of thing, but I know you've seen me do that kind of thing, Pat. So I can't really say that. But generally, yeah, because I know people are like, well, I don't want to click like a chicken. I don't want to do something embarrassing. And so that's not what I do generally. For a friend here and there for entertainment, I will if they want it. But if they don't want it, they're not going to be hypnotized anyway. So, it's using the power of the mind to focus on having an experience. And again, when you have that experience and in your imagination, it becomes real to you. And when it becomes real to you, your mind, your subconscious mind goes, I must be this type of person. Let me build new neural pathways to that type of person. And so that's what we do. We guide people into different imagined experiences, and the brain goes, oh, I must be this type of person. And that's where change starts to happen.
Because I always, and not that I'm a freaking scholar on it now, but I always thought hypnosis was like some hustle, like everybody was in on it kind of thing.
Like a palm reader.
I mean, yeah, I just thought it was like this weird kind of grift, because I'm like, how can you? I mean, 'cause I always thought like you're not going to do something you don't want to do. Like it's just not how it works. But then of course I saw it firsthand, and it does work that way. But are there people whose brains are just so freaking Trump tight? Like when I mean Trump, like not just so tight, they're unhypnotizable. Are there some people whose brains are just like that, or can everybody's stuff be hacked?
Yeah, and they're dead. So the human brain and nervous system and body is literally built for trance. Again, like 0 to 7, that's how we learn. So when someone says I can't be hypnotized, what they mean is I don't feel safe enough to let somebody hypnotize me. Right? That's generally what they mean. And even saying I can't be hypnotized is a hypnotic suggestion to the subconscious. So hypnosis, right? Like I can't be hypnotized. Well, that's going to be your experience then. Hypnosis is just you experiencing what you're focused on.
Interesting.
That's pretty much it. So if I had you focus on, this feeling of energy, like if there was a flame in your right hand and you imagine that and you close your eyes and you saw a flame and you felt the heat, you would start to feel tingles in your palm if you focused on it enough. Well, that's hypnosis. If I said, don't think about a pink elephant, you just picture a pink elephant, right?
Right.
And so just giving those commands to shift your focus, then that becomes part of your experience. And so people that are like being good at hypnosis is an incredible trait, because you can take conscious ideas or goals, put them into your subconscious, and then the subconscious goes and delivers them for you, right? We've already seen how that can happen based on our early childhood programming. Let's do it consciously. Let's decide like, hey, I want to have this outcome. I want to perform like this. I want to feel like this. And then we visualize it, we imagine it, we feel it in theta brainwave state, so it becomes more real than what's on the outside. That's when the subconscious goes, it's like a dog. It's like that German Shepherd, Pat, that was attacking you in that crowd fight. It's a heat-seeking missile for what you program it to. And so when you do that in theta brainwave over and over again, the subconscious goes, okay, I can do that. Like, you have no idea how much power I have. I can delete everything else in the environment except what's going to take you to that outcome. And that's what it does.
Is that why we become so suggestible through like basically television programming? And I don't know if this is true or not, but like the flicker rate puts us in a theta mind state that makes us more suggestible.
There's so many things that go on hypnotically in television. So here's a few. So you get, I talked about visual fixation, right? So you get visual fixation. Your eyes aren't moving. So you get that. You get emotions, right? There's like the better the show, the more emotion it generates within you. They're doing what's called opening and closing loops. So they always go to commercial right at that heightened state of like, what's going to happen? Are they going to live? Are they going to die? Are they going to break up?
Cliffhanger shit.
Heightened state happens, and then guess what? You get a commercial. So you're fixed on the TV. Commercial comes in that heightened state, but you don't want to leave because you got to see what's going to happen, right? They know that. So you stick around in a heightened emotional state. Those commercials are going in, and then boom, you come back, right? The same thing, like 5 o'clock news. We're going to tell you about the latest deadly virus that's ripping through our town. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to stick around and hear that. What is it? And so
next thing you know, you're in the grocery store buying pads with wings. You're not even a girl. You don't even have a girlfriend. You're like, what am I doing? These things have wings. I don't need them.
They use these open loops. They use emotions. And our brain, like when we use language, and then based on the words, we make pictures with that, because pictures are more powerful in our nervous system. Well, television is pictures. So that's going straight into the mammalian part of your brain. So there's a lot that goes on with television. Yeah. So this is why I haven't had a TV for about 15 years.
Yeah. Smart man.
Yeah. I stay away from TV as well. And you can definitely see the people that have been watching a lot of TV in the past few years. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, this is why I enjoyed having Nick on. And I mean, honestly, he's one of them cats that I want to have like a reoccurring guest. And, as we do, further with this show, I would love to possibly attend one of his seminars just to kind of see what he does and even possibly benefit from it. Cause I mean, he's been doing it. And I mean, it's not a lot of people can say they're transforming lives in the way Nick is. And I just think it's really cool what he's doing, man. Cause it's changing the quality of people's lives. And we need that now more than ever, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think for me, like, there's a lot of things I can do. Putting out content with the podcast and one-on-one hypnosis and stuff. But I know the most transformational stuff for me was live events, because what happens at a live event is you get that connection with other people. And when you have connection, you get dopamine, you get oxytocin, you get serotonin. And again, emotions are what create programs, right, in our brain. And so as we're releasing those emotions, those chemicals into our brain, we're now fertile for new belief systems. And so this is where, like, I'm connected with other people, like-minded people for 4 days. I feel like I'm part of this group. I feel one with everybody. Boom. All of a sudden, now we go change a meaning in our life. Now we see ourselves in the future as we want to be. And it's like the neurons just soak up those chemicals and they start to form new neural pathways. And I think that's the most powerful way for change is those live events. And that's why that's kind of my favorite thing in the world to do.
Well, and the thing is, getting into psychological and spiritual health and all of the self-care that we lost during COVID, the complete inverse was happening when we're restricted from human contact. No oxytocin, no serotonin. And it's not only we at home, we're hearing all this dog shit from Fauci and all these people just lying to us. It put us, I don't know. Again, I'm no doctor, but like that limbic system of like fight or flight, we were in freaking fight or flight constantly for those 2 years because we're just like, even if we do our best we can to fight fear, it's like that was a pretty fearful situation. And we're not seeing people, we're not talking to people, we're not having face to face, we're wearing masks. So, like you said, as powerful as that is, that human interaction, those 2 years, and we saw it with suicide rates, domestic violence, people beating their dogs and their animals, just emergency room visits.
And I was posting, I know we're probably going long here, but I was posting on my social media like, hey, this is a reminder that connecting with other humans is great for your immune system and it's great for your mental and physical health.
Right.
And being in close proximity with other people and not everybody like that, but it is what it is.
Yeah, fear-based trauma,
that's why at the beginning of all of this, a couple months after in May, we had the picnic at the park in Bettendorf. We had a couple hundred people come out and, there were ridiculous comments on, the Quad City Times. Section and story about this and video, of a lot of people going, oh my God, they're murderers, they're killing people, this and that. And it's just so outlandish and over the top, that the fear was just out of control. So yeah, we just do our best to control our own little world, right? That circle around us and work on our mindset constantly because it's definitely affected us all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Nick, anything else you'd like to bring up, or how can people get in touch with you who maybe want to have your services show up for a fee?
Yeah. So I have more than 100 podcast episodes. Pat's been a guest, talk about all things mindset, spirituality, and so that's the Spohn Trained podcast. You can find that anywhere podcasts are, but that's also on my website. So that's spohntrained.com, SPOHN, and then the word trained. And then Nicholas at spohntrained.com for if you want to send me an email. And I don't have an event scheduled right now. I'm working on scheduling one probably late spring. Destination's not set yet, but Jeffrey, Sedona's a popular request, so we may do that again.
Cool.
Jeffrey, anything else from you, buddy?
No, man, no. I could probably sit and talk to this guy forever, but I would love to have him back to continue just having these discussions, man, because it's one of those, like when we talk about on this show, the things we're talking about isn't affecting right, left, black, white, this gender, that gender, whatever. These are things that are transcending humanity and are affecting all of us. And there's nothing more that transcends politics and everything else than mental health, spiritual health. So I'm really, really thankful to have Nicholas on because I've been following him and he's doing the work. He's putting his money where his mouth is and he's really helping to transform people's lives. And I think that is a freaking beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, thanks guys for having me. It's been an honor. And one thing I'll leave with the audience is I think there's one main belief that really shapes our lives. It's that we are either a divine creator of our life or we're the victim of it. And I think when we believe we're a victim of the circumstances and there's nothing we can do to change it, our nervous system shuts down and goes, well, I'm not going to put out energy here. Let me just reserve all my energy for a situation I feel like I can control. And I think a lot of people are walking around as zombies, depressed, anxious, whatever, because of that single meaning that they've given to circumstances in life. And so when you start to believe this is happening for me, I'm the creator of this, I'm going to change this, I'm going to create something different, you get energy and you get power, and your emotions will start to change with that simple belief.
Beautiful. Well put, Nick. So thank you again for coming on the Self-Defense Warrior. And for my co-host, I'm Pat Miletich, saying goodbye for just a little bit. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.
See y'all.
Nice job, Nick. Thank you, buddy. And definitely want to do another one in the near future where we can have you do hypnosis.
Okay. Oh, shit. My bad.
Yeah.
I hit stop record. I didn't mean to do that.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
We're done.
Yeah, we're done. No stress, dude. You there, Jeff? Did we lose him?
Looks like it. I see him, but I don't hear him.
Okay. All right, man. I'll leave you alone. Let you go, dude.
All right. Thanks for having me, Pat. Good to see you. Jeff, we appreciate it, brother.